My name is Jessica Gershenfeld, and I'm a case manager here at the YWCA of Bucks County. I will be kind of facilitating the question and answer part of this series. We thank you all for joining and being a part of this really important community conversation. Just to go over a quick format, it's going to be about a half an hour of conversation and discussion between our executive director, Guillaume Stewart, and Ron Davis from Parx. And then after that, we'll kind of go into a question and answer, which you can either use the raise hand feature and I can unmute you and you can ask your question in person, or there should be a question and answer feature at the bottom of your screen. If you type your questions into there, I'll be happy to read them out loud for everyone. And then lastly, I just want to make sure that we all keep an open mind and respect each other's thoughts and opinions through this. I really hope that everybody can gain some important knowledge. And yeah, so I'm going to pass it over to our executive director at the YWCA, Guillaume Stewart.
Thank you, Jess. Thanks for that great introduction. It's good to see you. I'm excited that we have Ron Davis here today. Ron is the Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer and Director of Community Relations at Parx Casino. I had the good fortune of meeting Ron a few years ago. I know firsthand about his commitment to social justice. I know firsthand about his commitment to the community and the wonderful work that Parx as an organization do in Bucks County to support nonprofits. So we're super excited about that. Ron, how are you? I can't hear you, Ron. Is he me?
Hey, Ron.
Not yet. Oh, there he is. I think he's unmuted.
Yeah, he's unmuted. Ron, go to the bottom of your page where it says mute. There should be a little arrow, and you can select which microphone that you're joining from. Oh no.
Hello.
There we go.
Okay.
Sorry, I couldn't quite hear you.
Can you hear me?
Ron,
Yes.
it's good to see you. It's good to hear your voice, Ron. How are you?
It's good to see you too. You know, as many Zoom meetings as I do,
Right.
we should be accustomed to some technical start that is not as smooth as I would want it to be. But let me say, first of all, thank you for the opportunity.
Absolutely.
To be with you. Thank you for your organization. I know a number of our team members, including Patty Rooney, who's the president, Michelle Self-Duty, and a number of our team members, and we are a great team. I have been women who make a difference, is a number of them, but your work in the community is unparalleled. Thank you for this opportunity. I was with you, I guess, the last panel that you had.
That's right.
Kind of highlighted racism and your stand against racism and the talk about it in the community. And I appreciate being a person who also stands against that racism. Parx is certainly glad to be a part of this program. And our team, and I stand on the shoulders of everyone here at Parx with the diversity and inclusion efforts to highlight the strengths that the community in some ways have benefited, but that we have benefited from being part of that great community. And thank you, G, and thank you, support staff, for all you do and for this opportunity to have a sometimes compelling, hopefully, and a conversation that is an adult conversation about racism, about differences, and about life from my perspective. But thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, we appreciate it, Ron. I'm so excited to know about the work that you do, know about the great impact that Parx has in Bucks County around so many important issues. And I feel grateful that you're a part of this. So I have all these questions written down because I'm like, I want to make sure I can tap into Ron's expertise, his wonderful life experience and career experience. So my first question, Ron, is why is the work of diversity and inclusion so important to you in the work that you do at Park?
Well, my work, if there's anything that I've done, started many years ago. My family, first of all, was an inclusive family. We lived in a diverse neighborhood. So I grew up that way, even though, the ups and downs, the ins and outs, and the failures, the triumphs that I've had, started all in Camden, New Jersey. And my middle name is Ronald Willard Davis. My uncle, who I was named for, was actually in prison and killed by a prison riot with two, at the time, white officers, white inmates, and an officer looked the other way and he was dead. Well, the trial came about and Willard Jones, my uncle, was found that he was murdered, and they went through the whole trial. And it was my mother who saw a different page in my life to lead forward. She did not get upset because of that, because of who they were, what they're all about. She looked to a strong future for me, and she wanted to not overlook that, but she included people of all colors, races, and all that. And she lived it day to day. And that's what I try to do, is live through day to day. She wanted education for us all. And so I went to a HBCU, Historically Black College and University, in the South, which was an interesting awakening for me, because at the time I went, it was King had been assassinated. And I remember vividly going from New Jersey to Virginia State and seeing Washington, D.C. literally on fire. And the principles of King, even though that sacrifice happened, it just made me appreciative of his work, but also of the struggle that continues. And certainly George Floyd's murder pointed that out for African-American men, and African-Americans in general, how there could be an unjust system that needs correction. And we see a lot of diverse people out in the streets who have now gotten the message that justice is part of the expectation. And so we've also started emphasizing even more equality through justice, equality through education, equality for economic reasons, but that equality with sexual orientation. Those are some of the things that we're stepping forward with as we go forward into our new focus. So that gives you a little picture of Ron Davis. I played in the NFL, which we'll talk about a little later, which gave me appreciation, and actually through my life. I played for a number of teams and played high school, college, and pro football. And it made me appreciate what a good team is, and certainly we have one here, because I played on so many bad teams. I've got a lot of memorabilia behind me. I played on a number of bad, so I appreciate a great team, and because it takes just that appreciates the cohesive nature of humanity that should happen.
Yeah, I think that's really powerful, Ron, and it's a perfect segue into your thoughts and feelings about the murder of George Floyd. We saw our country respond. We saw many countries around the world respond to this incident, to this tragic incident. And I just wanted to hear your thoughts on that particular experience and the response by the communities around the world, and especially in our country here.
interesting enough, again, it's a murder, and unfortunately, during COVID, or fortunately, during COVID, people got to see it firsthand, and it brought about, for me, the weakness in not only justice system, but the tentacles of power within the cities and counties that could be that they'd be allowed to do anything that they wanted to do. But there's an old saying: sometimes you bury a seed and you don't know it's a seed, and you bury that seed and it grows. Well, his death has caused an awakening around the world. I mean, in France, Germany, and not only here, but it's caused an awakening of people who are committed to diversity, inclusion, and equity, and justice, and all the other ways. Now, protests, peaceful protests, are part of American history. We've had some demonstrations that have not been peaceful, but I think the awakening with the diversity of the people out in the streets who are insensitized to the issues around criminal justice, which is a whole nother subject that we could go into, around other kinds of things. One of the things that we do here at Parx, we support a lot of outreach, and one of the pleasant things that I do, I'm one of the developers of a thing called the Center for Male Engagement at the Community College. And these are men of color who, black and brown, who are seeking to connect with people who understand them and people who want to help them. And what we've done in the last 5 years with Parx, Parx has supported us 100% in that effort, is to give scholarships, but to listen. The key to life for me is listening and appreciating the value of people. Diversity is different individuals valuing each other regardless of skin, intellect, talent, or years. And I'll say it again: different individuals valuing each other regardless of skin, intellect, talent, or years. In this format at CME, we start to understand the value of the young men. They could be people who have been incarcerated and going to college, who have fought through the system, people who have families that have been broken. And unfortunately, that's an American story as much as any other story. And so as we go forward with helping them, we listen. And what we've done effectively is found new allies. And that's what we try to do at Parx. We try to find allies, not only with men of color, but with women's leadership, with veterans, with the disabled, with all the groups that need our support in our community and communities. And I would say the police also need our support. We are a crime commission. We support the crime commission. We support our efforts here in this community because we believe strongly that our police are heroes also. One of the interesting things, if you look at it, with all the things that have happened, they're good and bad in all of us. Sometimes we let the perfection be the enemy of the good. Perfection lead the enemy of the good, and nothing's perfect in this world or anywhere that I can imagine. And so we tend to have standards that everyone has to reach those standards. Well, everyone should try to reach those standards. But we have done things with our law enforcement here that I think is outstanding. They have programs. We support them, and we support those in Philadelphia. We honor the heroes there. But if you look at some of the commercials, there's every other hero out there. And now with George Floyd, unfortunately, what's happened is they are not looked at as heroes. They're looked at as, in some cases, enemies of the community. And we feel that there should be a better approach to that.
So can you speak to that a little bit? I think building healthy relationships with law enforcement and communities of color is super important. We want to make sure that communities are safe. We want to make sure that our law enforcement personnel are safe. How do we do that? How can the individual at home watching this, what role can we play in helping law enforcement have a better relationship with the communities that they serve, because we know that the bulk of them want to do a great job and work really hard, and they are heroes, like you point out.
Yeah, I think it starts with individuals. I think one of the things that has to happen in this new awakening, and we talk about in the world and NFL, whatever, people are introspective and should be. And that's where it starts inside. So it's what I do as an action to anything. It's not what they do, whoever they are. So I have to take responsibility to reach out to a young person. I have to take responsibility to reach out to law enforcement. I have to understand that they have families, that I have families. And so if I don't do that, it creates what I call a blind spot. And everybody, unfortunately, has a blind spot. And the bigger that blind spot is, it causes misunderstanding, it causes distrust. I came from a neighborhood that distrusted the police. Even though it was diverse, there's some elements in my community and even in my family, of course, after my tragic incident with my uncle, that could have had a blind spot. My mother didn't, and she guided us, I think, in a way that made sense for us. But we need to somehow deal with that. And there's economic justice, there's educational justice. Sometimes we don't really appreciate that your future is tied to your zip code. And, you know, if you're doing well in that zip code, you have a picture of what you feel is important. If you're not doing well, you have another picture. So, you know, funding and money and all the other things that you do. I mean, a classic example right now, I live at the Art Museum area, Philadelphia. There's an encampment outside of my condo, and our condos are pretty expensive. So my inclination is a person who has whatever made it or done whatever I've done is to shun people who need assistance. They set up an encampment on public land. I think it's in the news now. And so it becomes becomes one of those balancing acts that I have to go back and think about the need that I have and the humble beginnings that I have to make sure that I'm checked and make sure my blind spot is not there. People who need housing or have a need for a job or are in crisis. I know prior to all the COVID and certainly the George Floyd incident and the murder and the awakening of people, the opioid situation was just out of control. Nobody's talking about it now, but it's still there. There are people in crisis now because they've been basically four walls with challenging problems, and we're going to have to unfortunately deal with that. So there's a lot of things that are going on.
Right, and one of the important things I hear you saying, Ron, is being active and trying to learn so you can understand what your blind spots are. And we all have those blind spots, those gaps in knowledge. And I think the work around diversity and inclusion is the process of helping us to learn those blind spots. It's not an exercise, I think, in judging others or excluding others. It's really an invitation to say, how do I become a better person? How do I help out my neighbor? How do I work with the communities around me, including law enforcement, religious communities, business partners? So I really feel what you're saying, and I think that's really powerful. I wanted to touch on the Walking While Black project. Can you talk a little bit about that?
We were asked by Fred Haran, and he reached out to us. Would we support a video that's called Walking While Black? And what it does, it's you can actually go online, look at it. It is a video done by a Black man who was profiled in his own neighborhood while he was walking, who was stopped by the police in a very upscale neighborhood. And he was asked a number of questions. He ended up kind of bantering back and forth, and the police basically arrested him. Well, there was a great awakening during that time because he felt that the problem was, and they released him, but he felt the problem was that he didn't know the police. He didn't know that that there was value in their lives also, but he, their blind spot was he was an African American in a upscale neighborhood. He shouldn't be there. So he felt and worked on the project of this awakening with love, and there are words that stand for that, LOVE. But he started to develop a film with a Hollywood producer on his next level engagement, and he felt because they were not engaged with him or people who were like him, he had a challenge, or they had a challenge to deal with. So, long story short, what we did, we funded the program without Lincoln and I here at Parx, and we basically turned it loose to the community. B3T, Building a Better Ben Salem has shown it several times. We've shown it high school. It's shown it a number of times, and it's available. You have to secure it through funding, and so we provide the funding. And if they need more funding, we feel that project really defines us, along with being one of the things that we did initially 15 years ago, maybe 16, and now it's been here long. We became members of the NACP, corporate members, not just individual members. We felt and feel strongly about their mission. We do the CME. We do all ranges of outreach to the Jewish community, to the Jewish outreach community, Rabbi Travitsky. So and we do a lot of women's leadership and veterans and all the other quadrants that we feel are strong, because we want to make a statement through our work and a statement through the activities that we have. But that film is very valuable for anyone who wants to see it. I think you could, it may be on YouTube or one of the.
You can YouTube it. I had a chance to watch the film, and I found it to be very compelling. It made me think about my own experience and my own relationship with police officer and law enforcement. And I can just say as a Black male that there is this apprehension around that. How is the cop going to deal with me when he stops me? Will I make it home after this stop? Is a general and historical mistrust between communities of color and law enforcement. It's not through, I think my work through the YWCA really gave me a chance to learn more about what good cops are doing to help the community. And I think films like the one you did helps us have that conversation and help police officers build better relationships with people of color, which I think is central to the issue in the murder of George Floyd.
Sure. And one of the things that you have to do, or we do, and I have a son who's grandson, but he's closer to being my son than grandson, because we raised him. I had to talk about police, how to respect and handle yourself with that. In fact, at CME, one of the sessions we had, how do you, as a Black man, when you're pulled over and you are stopped, how do you react to police? We actually had a facilitator go through the whole thing about how your hands must, what you do with your hands and all that. So it's an interesting dynamic that's different than people who are not of color.
Yeah.
Or could be. I don't want to single it, and I don't want to give a blanket statement, because people have been stopped by the police of all colors, I'm sure, but it's a different dynamic.
Right. And I think that's speaks to the important work of building communities through diversity and inclusion, so that communities of color, Black people, brown people, have better relationships with law enforcement and see them as a resource and see them as a part of the pillars of our community, and value the hard work that they do. Speaking of social justice and police, community policing, what are your thoughts about the Colin Kaepernick protest? For the people listening, Colin Kaepernick was an NFL football player. He was a quarterback for the San Francisco 49ers. He decided a couple years back to take a knee during the Pledge of Allegiance in recognition of police brutality. And of course, that became a really big story, covered in all the media outlets. But I think the Kaepernick story is especially interesting in our current context, like understanding what we're going through now with George Floyd. So what are your thoughts about Kaepernick and in relation to the protest?
Well, as a former player in the NFL, and although you see this space image behind me, I'm in my office with a lot of locker room junk, footballs and all that. I played with the Cardinals and the 49ers. I was drafted by the 49ers. I'll give you, first of all, a picture of the NFL when I was playing. The picture of the NFL when I was playing, again, this was 70s, 80s, was that you did what you were told and you kept your mouth shut. And if you didn't, not only did the owners trade you or cut you, the team itself would you'd be alienated from the team because you were destroying the team concept. You were part of a problem that they didn't need. You were a locker room problem. And so for a number of years, and you can see the decades, the athletes who in some cases were called prima donnas because they were aloof, although there were people like Jim Brown and others who spoke out, would not speak out or could not speak out because of that unwritten rule that you don't, even I remember the NFC that you couldn't have facial hair. They would cut you for having facial hair. So the whole NFL dynamic that we could talk for hours about. Well, the awakening again for Colin Kaepernick, he was very, and it came in 2016. He had the courage, and I use that word, to live with his convictions. Now, for a person like me, not standing for the flag is unheard of because I grew up that way. My lens, my spot, or whatever my blog is that I love America. I love this country, and it's done everything for me that I could ever imagine. I've again stood on the shoulders of so many people who helped me. I've had the blessing and the luck and people of faith who just ushered me along after a lot of disappointments. So Kaepernick came along and changed the dynamic. Now he paid the price.
Yes.
Initially, because he was still in that old mindset, not old, but prior mindset of, a player didn't speak out, particularly if you had a bad year, bad player. if you don't perform, speak out doesn't do you any good. They could find reasons to cut you. He is a fraternity brother of mine, so I do have a closer relationship too. But over the last 3 or 4 years, there has been an awakening in the NFL among the players. So the players have started their outreach, and the players today feel empowered because they feel more than a player, and that wasn't allowed years ago. That was part of the mystery, part of the challenge. They weren't allowed to be part of that social justice movement. And Malcolm Jenkins, for instance, Malcolm put his career on the line and continues to do so. He'll speak out. But that's a different dynamic, really, in the last 15 years. So kudos to, do I agree with everything that Kaepernick did at the time? No. But do I now see and appreciate the courage it took for him to open that door? With social justice, with all the things that he's done, because there's a lot of pressure in that locker room, and he was on the cusp of all that change, and now the NFL itself is apologizing. Roger Goodell apologized that he did not listen to the players.
Yeah, I thought that was powerful, that the commissioner now understands what Kaepernick was trying to communicate when he made his protest during our national anthem. And I think people at home, people in the communities are saying, we want to see change. We want to see things become different and things become better in our society. And sometimes I'm of the opinion that that takes protest, that takes raising the hard questions or doing the difficult thing that Kaepernick did.
Well, you know, the interesting thing, it was Kaepernick, but it was before that in the NBA when Donald Sterling, who owned the Clippers, made a racist comment. The commissioner basically fired him from ownership. If you remember, if you go back to 2014, because the players were upset about it, but he again had courage. The commissioner had the foresight and insight to say, okay, we're going to put a marker down and can no longer own a team in the NBA. That was
Right.
that was a moment. That was
powerful.
That was very powerful because LeBron James and you look at LeBron now, he's the same kind of person. They realized that that the value of the image of the NBA is so important that we can't have that in our sports.
Yeah, agreed. I'm looking at my list of questions, Ron, and I want to get a couple questions in before we open it up.
I'm a little long-winded.
No, I'm glad we're talking about this. I think this is an important issue. We want our listeners to understand the value of diversity, the importance of inclusion, the work that you do through Parx, the work we do here at the YW. It's all about diversity and inclusion. So these are important topics. I want to get to another topic that was really in our consciousness over the last couple of years, and it's been about the Confederate statues. In many places in our country, southern states, some northern states perhaps, there's a lot of Confederate statues. And some people have been protesting that, some people have been against it, some people have been for it. What are your thoughts about that? And I know you have a connection to that from some of the work you did in Richmond.
Many things that I've done. I've been blessed to do a number of things. One of the things that we talk about is faith, and I have it in a lot of things in our country and our community. But I had an experience of being basically a tourism director in Richmond, Virginia. And during that time, one of the things that I was able to do along with others is show another side of all that challenge in the Confederacy, the fact that they emphasized slavery and were there because of it. And the interesting dynamic for me was that there was, an awakening of strong people who appreciated the history of where they've come from and what the direction of what they wanted to do. And I say that because a friend of mine was L. Douglas Wilder. He's a black man who was the first governor of the state of Virginia, first governor in the U.S. And he came out of that atmosphere. So imagine the pearl that was created through the friction of all that stuff, those images and all that realized that this man was a quality. Another person was Arthur Ashe. Me, fundamentally, I believe those statues should be in a museum somewhere. But I don't believe in taking away the history. To give you an example of my thought, Williamsburg, in Williamsburg, Virginia, they have an interpretive experience. And in that interpretive experience, they took away the slave quarters. That was, to me, that repositioned history. I don't think that was right, but they did it. But I want to make sure that the people whose legacy was there knows where their legacy came from. And so some of the mistakes that I think that America made, even though pointed out, should be kept and appreciated in history. because they're, you can repeat those mistakes. So I think that, because of the accuracy of history, I wanted to suggest that they be kept in the museum. The interesting thing is, I have friends still in Richmond, and they're probably written all over most of the statues. One of the statues was to my friend Arthur Ashe, and he did the same thing to his statue. So a lot of it is disruption. A lot of it's disagreement with history, and certainly things that tear us apart shouldn't be displayed. But the history is, one of the weaknesses, I think, of our and I say young people, old people, whoever, is that we don't know history, and we try to erase it. And so I think it should be appreciated for the depth of the issue, the problem, and the appreciation of how you came out of that. America, to me, is always figuring things out. I think we'll figure these next steps out. We'll figure out how to help police. We'll figure out how to help people. We'll figure out education and poverty. And so, but we must learn from, in my opinion, from history. And that gives us a perspective that may help us as we move forward. And the legacy of life needs to be appreciated. I know a family who are offspring of Thomas Jefferson. It's very interesting. And they happen to be an offspring of Sally Hemings. And any of you know that story. She was a slave who had a number of kids by Thomas Jefferson. But today, if you went down there, they have a reunion of white and black offspring of Thomas Jefferson. And they look just like Thomas Jefferson, the black offspring. So they appreciate being here. They appreciate what happened. They didn't, slavery was part of that history, and they know it. But they've come together to celebrate now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I just.
Hello.
I think we lost G for a second, but we're gonna check in with him. But we do have some questions in the Q&A, Ron, if you're ready for that.
Yes,
while we figure out
always ready.
Okay, awesome. So we'll start with our first question. It's coming in from Roweda, and it says, talking about racial inequality at work is difficult. As a successful person in leading your job, can you give some tips on how to do it thoughtfully?
Well, first of all, it is difficult. These are difficult conversations. Difficult, and you must start with that premise in mind. D&I, diversity and inclusion work, is the hardest work that will challenge you. I would first of all find allies who believe the same thing that you believe, and discussions around, open discussions. And these are uncomfortable conversations. So find people that would, with that premise, take uncomfortable conversations and not just leave them there, but want to talk. I know we had this morning had a great discussion about race and the differences, but the value of the similarities. And when that starts, I believe, and taking it home to other places, but finding allies who may not be of your color, finding allies who may even challenge you. But at the end of the day, it's an ongoing motion picture. It's not a snapshot.
Right.
A lot of people are expecting a snapshot. They believe what no, it's ongoing respect and value that is needed.
Great, thank you. And all right, G, we have you back, but you're silent.
Hey, G. He's back.
He's back.
He's kind of.
Chris. I'm back. I know you guys missed me while I was
Okay.
technical difficulty.
Difficult.
Yeah, sorry. Are we having questions now? I hope we're gonna open it up, Jess, for folks to ask Ron questions.
On to some questions. You want to keep going with some of those?
Yeah, let's keep going with it. Yep.
Awesome. So for anyone attending, I do have some questions already in the Q&A box, but you know, if you feel like you have questions, feel free to.
And don't feel, Ron Davis does not know all. One of the things about me, I'll tell you the truth. If I know it, I will tell you about it. If I don't, I will tell you that too. So
The honesty is great.
Mhm.
So we have a question from Chris. It says, I believe it is the responsibility of white America, those in the position of power, to recognize the situation and make a difference. How can I help do that? I live in a very white community in Chester County.
well, you know, G, you want to handle that, or you want?
Oh no, that's too big for me to lift up, Ron. I'm punning to you, but I said it's a great question. I love
It
that.
is. I think we all have to take account for our families and communities. We have to go back, no matter, you know, as they say, speaking to power, speaking to our relatives, having conversations that make sense, having a direct expectation of taking a value of information away. Now that can lead to conflict. But I think interesting today, I've got so much faith, you know, seeing those protests,
Mhm.
people who walked for
Mhm.
hours. Again, peaceful. Just the peaceful side. The other side, I'm certainly not for. But the peaceful side, who walk for hours. The Black Lives Matter, whatever it may be, whatever the slogan, and there'll be other slogans, I'm sure, in the future. But they walked, and they were a diverse group. So point to that in your discussion and talk, that diversity is important, and go take it home to your family. Don't just be silent. Silence sometimes allows good people not to help in this effort.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for that. I think we lost G again, but we'll keep moving on. All right, we have a question from Kathy. It says, how do we address those and I think you a little bit touched on this in your previous answer, but how do we address those fellow citizens in our community that deny that there is systemic racism? It is hard to know how to speak to them about this.
Yeah, again, that's part of the hard work that we all have. It's not easy. We have to, again, find those support allies. I'm sure there's information that we can uncover. As I said, let's take the zip code information that I gave you and look at the money spent in those zip codes. Just look at the results of the reflection of the community and who's working and who's not working. Not necessarily, that's not the only reason that they're not working, but certainly can be an indicator. So I think open to information that we could gather will help us.
Definitely.
Can you hear me?
It's G again. G, what's going on there?
I know. Is it Monday? It must be Monday. What's today's date? I can't get it right. But I want to add to what Ron said, because working here at the YWCA is giving me an opportunity to really engage in social justice work. And one of the things that I think is so important is what Ron said, the ability to learn and to be open to new ideas. But also it takes a lot of courage, to the last question that the person raised. It takes courage to have those tough conversations about bias. And we all have those biases. We all have our blind spots. You know, it's not only along the lines of race, but it's gender, it's age, it's, you know, sexual orientation. And so I think having the courage to really face those biases, and when you see them in society, speak out against them. Even if you're not a part of that group. I had an opportunity through the YW to be a part of the Women's March a couple years back. Now, I happen to not be a woman, but I really know that women struggle to have equity in society. So putting myself in their shoes to the best of my ability, hearing their stories, and being a voice, and joining their voice, and taking stands with them, I think is a vehicle that can promote change on local level and on a national level too.
The Y does such a great job, and kudos to all the efforts that you have. And not only, one of the things that happen, people do a lot of talking, and I put myself sometimes in that category, but your feeding outreach is unbelievable. And you might want to talk about that, because I think that's during the pandemic, there were organizations that were going away, organizations not doing what you have done. So could you talk about that a second?
Yeah, thank you, Ron, for bringing that up. So we know that we've all been impacted in one way or another by COVID-19. Either we know someone who's been, physically impacted, but it's had an impact on all of us. Here in Bucks County, we run food pantries through our community centers. And Ron just shouted us out. I want to shout out the staff and our board for just being on the ground, going to give food out to people who are in need. And just going to these community centers, there were so many people who needed food during this time. And we were able to feed families, and that felt really empowering. It felt like we were supporting our mission, we were supporting our community, and we were helping families in need. So thank you, Ron, for bringing that up. And thank you to all the staff. Jess, I know you were there. A bunch of the staff was there. Our board reached out and they volunteered. It was just really an amazing event. In terms of serving people when we were really in need and dealing with the pandemic.
And servant leadership is part of the step toward perfection in our daily walk. Servant leadership, and those kinds of things help define the message. And so you guys have a great message, because guess what? Leadership is action, not position. Leadership is action, not position. And thank you for your actions.
Yeah, that has to become a bumper sticker or something, Ron. I love it. A T-shirt. I want to get it on a T-shirt.
Well, I'm one of the organizations that I spoke to about has that as their moniker. So
yeah,
I believe in R&D, and some people say rip off and duplicate. And so that's hard.
I love it. Yeah. Any more questions for Ron, Jess?
The next question is very similar to the one before, but I don't know if it's a little more direct if we want to dig a little bit deeper into that. It says, if it's from Anonymous, and it says, if you meet someone who tends to be ignorant when it comes to serious issues like this, how do you get your point through to them?
Well, again, it's part of the difficult journey that we all have. There are people who are not going to believe you, people who have to be convinced. It's a thing called the Browning of America. There are more families now, multicultural. I know my grandson is multicultural. He's Hawaiian, he's Black, he's white, and even myself, I have a bit of Irish in me. I may not look like that, but that's identity. I think what happens is, over time, you'll find attitudes changing if you're listening, if you're compassionate, and it may not happen with everybody. It may not happen overnight, but if you have the right attitude yourself and faith, one of the things that really has governed America in its challenge, and people may not see it, I see it, is the faith that things will be better and things will happen in our community. We'll have a better, because of the seed that was planted, unfortunately, by a murder of George Floyd. That seed will now grow fruit that may be positive for change in every justice system, whether it be police, whether it be those in power, those who spend money in our community, and those who want to reach people with their caring. Another part of it is, if you're an individual who likes this work, you have to care. That's number one. There are people who may not care, so that's not work necessarily for them, but for you, you care passionately about it, it's work for you.
Mm-hmm. And could I just add to that and say, getting involved, taking that compassion that Ron's talking about and using it through involvement with nonprofits, with religious groups, with business community. I find that's the best way to really have a voice, is to get involved in various organizations and to really speak truth to power. I think that's what's neat about what's happening now. Folks have so much energy around social justice. So connecting with other people that have that, joining organizations that do that kind of work and getting involved, whether it's tutoring, whether it's going to a food pantry, whether it's going to a place of worship, becoming an organic part of the community through involvement is a way to really show people around us that the message is strong, the message is real, and we're going to continue to do the good work.
And it doesn't have to be huge. One of the things I try to measure myself, and this is my own inner focus, is that I try to find one person that I can help that day. One person that it doesn't have to be 10, 20, but if I can find one person that I can connect with, and if they need my help, I try to reach them. They may see me as a person who can't help them, but that satisfies that outreach. So then if you multiply that times the numbers that are out there, it can be very rewarding.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
All right, Jay, you want to go to the next question?
Yeah, next
How many
question.
questions?
Two more right now in my
Okay.
very similar, so I'll read them both before we answer. So the first one says, I think our students are more inclusive than the adult community. How do we continue to teach them not to listen to negative adults, etc., in their lives? And then the second one, which I said is similar, any tips on how to discuss racism and the recent events with children?
Yeah, I think sometimes we think children are not, should be shielded from this and that. I think today children hear and see many things, and they, at least in my world, they grew up in more of a multicultural appreciation because they do see it on TV and all the other. I think you're careful to listen to them if they have questions, but you want to make sure that you create high standards for your discussion with whatever those standards are, whatever your bar is, should be of a high standard. And so in education, you should be part of that education process. One of the most interesting things that my grandson went to Friends School, and they are so on fire with DE&I that it takes me back as a professional. So there are things happening in schools out there that are directly DE&I focused. Many of our schools have that as a prerequisite for the daily walk, and so it's really gives me real hope for the next generation, for a legacy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think the more that the younger people see diversity in action through schools, through after-school programs, through camps, through communities living together, that message gets reinforced to a young person that this is what a healthy community looks like. One of the things that I think is important is as we work to tear down discrimination, we also have to give people a model of what diversity and inclusion looks like. And I think that's the work that Ron has been committed to through Parx for so many years. Is certainly the work that we're committed to at the YW, is what does actual real community look like? And I have the good fortune of visiting our camps every year around summer. So I go to the talent shows, I go see the kids, and it's so much diversity. I mean, there's kids from everywhere. We have Asian kids, Black kids, white kids, Latino kids, Middle Eastern children. It's just so much diversity there. And I think the kids are playing together and enjoying each other. And that message is resonating with them. So when they see that model of what a healthy community looks like, they can choose that over some of the negative things that they might hear whether it's from family or on TV or what have you. So I think the more we give societies models of what actual diversity and inclusion looks like, the stronger that message gets.
And sometimes it's not in the history books. So we need to do our own homework to prepare them to appreciate that. A cultural sensitivity, cultural training, cultural differences, cultural similarities can be also an uplifting part of this. There are different things in each culture that are important to know.
Yeah, and there's good food in all these cultures. Now, let me just give some context to that. Ron's laughing, but in Ben Sullum at our family center, we do an international luncheon. And Ron, I know some of your staff has been there, your colleagues, Michelle is there throughout the years, but we invite people to bring dishes from their culture. So it's not only about eating, though we do a lot of eating at these events, but it's about celebrating difference and learning something different. And at our last event, which I think was last summer, we had over 25 different cultures represented in one room. So whether it's, the Asian community, the Native American community, we have so many people there celebrating that difference. And I think that's a powerful message that resonates with people who want diversity in our community.
Yes, it is. And this springboarding of the word culture, we had talked about change in organizations. Again, one of those sayings that R&D sayings that I use. Culture eats strategy for lunch. So if you have a strategy that you want to push on a certain organization group, realize that the culture may need changing in order for that strategy to work. So look at that also.
Agreed. I agree.
So,
any more questions? Yeah, Jess.
we do have, I think we have Karen who shared a couple resources on different books and things. So I'm just letting everyone, all the attendees know that I'm going to share that in the chat as well. And then I just want to finish off by saying also in the chat, I'm going to send a link to register to the future sessions, the future community conversations that we're going to have. And I think I just personally would like to thank G and Ron for this conversation. I think it was really helpful and really educational. And then G, I'll give it back to you to kind of wrap everything up.
And before he does, let me just say to all of you, this has certainly been a powerful opportunity for me. One of the things that we all have and seek is, what is your truth? This has been an hour of speaking my truth. And I appreciate that, because sometimes we don't get an opportunity to talk about that. So thank you so much. Thank you, organization. Thank G and Jessica and all the other folks.
Ron, we're really grateful to have you here. You're such an inspiration, I think, to all of us. And we appreciate the work that you and your colleagues do. Patty, Rooney, Michelle, everyone over at Parx has just been so amazing in this work around diversity and inclusion. And it resonates deeply with our mission as an organization. So I'm grateful for this conversation. I also want to just thank the participants who registered today, who got online to hear this conversation. That's the first step in this process, is being able to talk to one another and understand each other. And as an agency, we believe in that. As a YW, we believe in that. We want to hear from you. So like Jess said, please join us for the next one. I think it's going to be really insightful and really fun. Thank you, Ron.
And thank you for your action. Leadership is action and not
That's right. That's right.
Thank you so much. We'll see you guys next week.
Thank you.
Bye.